Roll for Crit presents How to Play Thebes in 5 minutes or less or more. Thebes is the game of Mediterranean exploration and excavation for education, designed by Peter Prinz and published by Queen Games. Your goal in Thebes is to gain the most victory points by excavating valuable artifacts and displaying them in exhibits. Each player begins with one archaeologist figure, a time marker, and a time wheel in their color, plus 5 excavation permission tokens. Players place their archaeologists in Warsaw to start, and their time markers at the beginning of the time track. If playing with 3 players, start your time markers at space 16 instead. A game of Thebes takes place over a certain number of years, depending on the number of players. A year is represented, of course, by 52 weeks, as depicted by the spaces on the time track. Players will take turns moving and taking actions which cost different amounts of weeks, moving their time markers around the board accordingly. The time track also determines turn order. Whichever player is currently farthest behind on the track takes the next turn. If at the end of their turn their time marker is still the farthest behind, then they take another turn and so on until they are no longer last. If you land on a space with another player's marker, stack yours on top of theirs. If multiple players are in last place, the player whose marker is on top of the stack takes the next turn. On your turn, you'll first move your archaeologist to a location on the board, then choose one of 4 different actions to carry out. At the end of your turn, you'll move your time marker the appropriate number of spaces depending on what you accomplished. But first, in order to move, an archaeologist must travel along these dotted lines from location to location, and each movement from one point to another costs 1 week. So to move from Warsaw to London would cost 2 weeks. Feel free to move through other players' archaeologists or land in the same space as them. Also, you don't have to move if you don't want to. However, you do have to take one action. One action choice is to take a researcher card from one of the 4 face-up researcher cards on the board. Each card has a European city printed at the top next to a cost in weeks. In order to take that card, your archaeologist must be in the matching city, and you must be willing to move your time marker that many spaces forward to pay for it. Take your chosen card and place it face up in front of you. Some cards will help you save time. If you discard the Zeppelin from your play area, it will reduce your total travel time to 0 for that turn only. If the car is in your play area, any travel time of 3 weeks or more is reduced by 1 week, and you don't have to discard it after use. There are also the Congress cards, which award you points for how many you've managed to collect by the end of the game. Most of the other cards have to do with excavations, which we'll get to shortly. After choosing and taking a card, replace it with a new one from the top of the deck. Mixed into the deck, you'll also find exhibition cards. If one of these is drawn, place it in the spot labeled A in the opposite corner of the board, instead of with the other researcher cards. Then draw again to fill out those 4 spots. If there are already exhibition cards there when another is drawn, push the rest down 1 space. If one is pushed off the C space, it is discarded. Exhibition cards will be important for scoring points later on. If you aren't interested in any of the researcher cards currently face up, you can instead choose to take the exchange cards action on your turn. Discard all of the cards there and replace them with 4 new ones from the deck, dealing with exhibition cards just like before. This action costs 1 week and can only be taken if your archaeologist is in Warsaw. If you end up wanting to take this action twice in a row and no one else's turn interrupts yours, it will cost 2 weeks the second time, and for a third time 3 weeks, and so on. Your next action choice is to perform an excavation at one of the 5 Mediterranean countries in this area of the board. In order to excavate a site your archaeologist is at, you'll need to have 1 unused excavation permission token in the matching color, and at least 1 matching specialized knowledge point. You'll find specialized knowledge points across various tokens and cards, in the form of book icons, legends from the people icons, and assistant icons. Each book or legend icon count as 1 knowledge point. For assistants, you'll need a pair to count as 1 point, while 3 assistants count as 2 points. If you only have 1 assistant, you can choose to count it as a knowledge point, but you'll have to discard it afterward. In order for a knowledge point to be considered specialized, it must be in the color matching your current excavation site, and you need at least 1 of those to carry out the action. Assistant cards can be used for any of the 5 colors. There is another type of knowledge which can be used for any site, called general knowledge, represented by open book icons. These are also worth 1 knowledge point each, however, you cannot use more general knowledge icons than you have specialized icons during an excavation. For example, if you had 3 specialized points and 4 general, only 3 of your 4 general points would be able to be applied. Once you've counted up your total number of knowledge points from amongst relevant cards and tokens, pick up your time wheel and rotate it so that it shows that total number. Then, decide how many weeks you'd like to spend digging. That number of weeks, printed in black, corresponds to how many tokens you get to dig for, printed in red. Each location has a corresponding bag of tokens. When ready, reach into the bag without looking and blindly draw the correct number of tokens according to your time wheel. Blank tokens are known as debris and have no value. Therefore, any debris you draw is returned to the bag. Everything else you get to keep face up in front of you. If you're the first player in the game to dig at a site, you'll also receive one bonus token, which begins the game in that space. Once the excavation is complete, flip your permission token to its used side. You won't be able to dig at that site again until it's flipped back. There are also a couple researcher cards which will help with excavations. Accumulate shovels to allow you to draw additional tokens when digging, or use a special excavation card to dig at a site without flipping a permission token. So what's the point of the items that you dig up at sites? Well, some of them will provide knowledge, but the rest are artifacts, which can be used for points and in exhibitions. Those exhibition cards mentioned earlier each display a city name and a number of circles in different colors. If on your turn you are in the indicated city and you have artifacts matching the number and color of one of those face-up cards, you can take the Execute an Exhibition action to take that card and place it in your play area. This action does cost a certain number of weeks as indicated in the corner of the card, but does not require you to spend your artifacts. They can be used again for another exhibition later. The value of an artifact is not important for the purposes of exhibitions, but found items with book icons cannot be used, only artifacts. The first time the researcher deck runs out, reshuffle the discard pile along with another set of cards that was removed at the start of the game. This will bring new, more valuable exhibition cards into the mix. After moving your archaeologist and taking one action, you'll advance your time marker according to how far you traveled and the cost of the action you chose. Determine which player is now farthest behind, and they take the next turn. Once you cross the 52 space of the time track, you have entered a new year. This means you get to flip all your permission tokens back up to be used again in new excavations. When all players have crossed that space, the year marker advances. If your marker passes 52 weeks in 1903, the final year, you can no longer take any more turns or actions for the remainder of the game, and you can't take any actions toward the end of the game if they would move your time marker beyond space number 1 in the year 1903. If you end up with nothing you'd like to do, you can simply move your marker to that space. The game is over once all players have landed on space number 1 at the end of the year. Finally, all players count up their score totals, adding the values of their artifact tokens, exhibition cards, and Congress cards. In addition, for each area/color, whichever player has the most specialized knowledge points in the form of closed books on cards or tokens gains an extra 5 victory points. If there's a tie, tied players all receive 3 points instead. Whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game wins. In conclusion, move, research, excavate, exhibit. That's Thebes in a nutshell. Did you get all that?